Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on Interview with an Agile Expert, which aims to deep dive into the world of agility. And this webinar is not only for experienced professionals, but it is also for freshers and students. And before we begin, let me introduce myself. My name is Gunjita Gupta. I'm an Enterprise Agile Coach, SPC 6.0, with close to 2 decades of IT experience. I have catered to more than 50 clients, and I have trained more than thousands of professionals into various aspects of agility. And with me, I have my prestigious guest, Mr. Arvind Ramachandran, who is an Agile coach, a transformation consultant, visionary leader, a proven leader, and a business coach, and much more. Having more than 25 years of extensive experience into the world of Agile, owner of freeminds.in, and very famous face in our Agile community, one of the few who has transformed businesses like Hindustan Unilever, PayPal, Dabur, Shell, Ericsson, ABB into agility. Welcome, Arvind sir. Welcome to this webinar. I'll unmute you, sir. Yeah, you can unmute, sir. Yes.
Hi. Hi, thank you so much for the kind words. So glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to having a great interaction. So rather than interview, I would say it's more of a discussion.
Right, sir. So for our audience and all, the very first thing that I wanted to understand, so Agile is the new buzzword. And we know now that the traditional project management is somewhere becoming obsolete, and Agile is something where people are moving towards. So some of the principles or the key foundations of Agile that you can, throw light on.
Sure. Uh, so yes, as you rightly said, Agile has become a buzzword, and there is a lot of focus and conversation around Agile. Before we talk about the principles, let's look at Agile in a wholesome context. What is agility, right? And if you look at it, every business is operating in a context. They are not operating in a silo, right? They operate in a context, in an environment, and this context or environment is rapidly changing, and the ability of the business to adapt to these changes, that is what is agility. If you look at it, agile itself is an adjective, yeah, but it has now become a noun, right? Saying, they talk about agile as a noun, which kind of is, I would say, is the philosophy.
Right.
So let's always keep one thing in mind. The fundamental thing, when we talk about agility, it is the ability of this business to adapt to the rapidly changing context or changing environment. We will always keep that at the back of the mind. And if you look at it, right, it originated with an agile manifesto. They said, manifesto for agile software development, and this is the website. If you go into this website, you will be able to see what the founders they laid down as the manifesto, which has 4 values and then 12 principles behind those values, right? Having said this, then came frameworks which said, okay, we will help support the software development to be agile. And these are frameworks like Scrum. Scrum is one of the most popular framework which is being used in a lot of places. So you have Scrum, you have Kanban, and so on. And then came scaling frameworks. For scaling frameworks was because typically, if you look at just the pure play Scrum, it talks about a team size of, say, 9 to 12 people in a team, or 7 to 12 people in a team. But
Right.
then large organizations, they have hundreds of people doing the development work. Then how do you adopt Scrum? Then came the scaling frameworks like SAFe or large scale Scrum or the Spotify model and so on, right? Having said this, to look at I think you were asking about the key principles, right? So there are four values which was laid down by the founders and what they value, and then based on these values are based on 12 principles, right? And I'm not going to read through it, yeah, but overall when you look at the values, what they are saying is you can look at it as two parts. One on the left hand side, for example, the first one says individuals and interactions on the left hand side, right? So what they say is we value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, right? And it doesn't mean that processes and tools are not important. They are very important. But when there is a conflict between these two things, the value guides you, saying that we value what is there on the left hand side over what is there on the right hand side, right? And we talked about the principles, right? And these are the 12 principles. Again, you will find the link in the website for the Agile Manifesto itself. These are the 12 principles. And we said organizations need to adapt to the rapidly changing environment or context in which they are operating. And how do they do that? These principles support precisely that. Right? You talk about early and continuous delivery of software, right? We want to deliver quickly to the client, and we want to do this early, right? So which needs to adapt to the changing requirements. And again, if you look at a traditional project, typically you tend to freeze the requirements upfront, and scope creep becomes one of the biggest challenges. And I have extensive experience managing projects as well and coaching project managers. And in when I all the project managers, when I coach them, I typically ask them, what percentage of your projects were you able to deliver on time without any change in the requirements? Can you guess what the answer was?
Maybe 100% of the time they are not able to meet that.
Absolutely right. Absolutely zero, right? So requirements are bound to change, and timelines, obviously, since the requirements shift, the timelines will need to will also need to change, right? So having said that, one of the key things about agility is we want to welcome the changes, right? That's okay. We know that the changes will be there. So how do we adapt to this? Right? And here, how do we deliver working software, right? It's not just, when you look at a project, typically you say, okay, so much percentage of requirements gathering is done in a traditional manner, right? So much amount of design is done, right? But having said all this, if there is no working software, even if you have crossed 70% of the whole project, if there is no working software, the value or the use of it is nothing ultimately, right? So the focus is to deliver working software frequently. And the again, when you look at why does IT exist, right? IT exists to enable or to deliver value to the business so that the business can deliver the value proposition to their customers. If that is not being done, there is no point in IT being there. And that brings in the need for the developers as well as the business, people who are running the business, who are creating the strategy, who are devising the value proposition of the business, for them, for both of these teams to work together to deliver value.
Right.
One of, again, the next principle, which talks about building value around motivated individuals, this is I would say, one of the key principles, but ignored in a lot of organizations, whether they are agile, they are not agile. Everywhere it is key, but then why I'm saying it is ignored in a lot of places is there is a trust which needs to be built. And if there is a trust which is built between the stakeholders and between the people who are building whatever they are building, the product which they are building, and if there is this trust, then a lot of communication becomes easier, a lot of development becomes much easier. But this is one of the key things I see lacking, and we'll talk about it a little more when we get into some other details. And it is something which needs to be cherished and which needs to be built as part of the culture of the organization. And of course, face-to-face conversation is always most important, and that is the best way to communicate anything, right? And everywhere we see there is so much of communication gap, there is so much of misunderstanding. People would get into arguments and say, no, that is not what I meant, or and so on. Typically, if you look at it, these are triggered when you type things on chat or when you send emails. You will see that, these are devoid of emotions which you can make out when you talk face to face. These are devoid of the tone of voice, right? So something which you say can be totally misconstrued, right?
Correct.
Excuse me. And again, we just talked about doing a lot of work, but if there is no working software, if there is no point, there is no value which is delivered. So how do you measure progress? Agile, we say working software is the only measure on progress. That is the only thing which defines how much progress has been made and what is, because that is what is adding value at the end of the day. The next thing talks about sustainable development, right? You have a team, and typically if you look at it, in even whatever method or whatever methodology a person might adopt, typically you will see that when there is a release or when the project is closing its go live, right? Any such thing, there will be a whole lot of activity. People are working like 18-hour days and 20-hour days and so on. And some other times they are slacking, right? But 18-hour days, 20-hour days, if you are working, is that a sustainable way to deliver anything, right? You can do it for a short period of time, a small burst, right, is possible. But if you talk about sustainability, you cannot carry on like that for weeks together, to months together, to years together, right? One of the, again, because we are saying we want to continuously, in the first principle we saw, right, we want to continuously deliver working software. We want to deliver early. We want to do this iteratively. And this is a process which goes on repeatedly, week after week after week and month after month, right? So sustainability is important. The pace at which we are doing, that is important. The next principle is one of my most favorite, right? Simplicity. The art of maximizing the work not done, right? The art of maximizing the amount of work not done. Okay. How can, I mean, a lot of times, people ask me, how can that be a principle? How can we reduce, work not done? Why should we maximize it? We should rather maximize the work we are doing, right? So this is kind of counterintuitive, but I think this principle in itself is so beautiful, because fundamentally, if you look at it, how do I maximize the work not done? Let me give you a scenario, right? So you are working on developing some product, and there is a development team which is working on it. There is a testing team which does the testing. They find out some bugs. It comes back to the developer. Developer goes and fixes the bugs, and then it goes back to testing and so on, right? Let us say that you implement BDD or TD, BDD and hence TDD, right? Behavior development and test-driven development, right? So when you implement these, what are you doing? You are devising the test cases based on how the application or product should behave, and based on the test cases, you are doing the development purely for the test cases. So when you adopt that approach, how many bugs do you think the tester will find? None, right? Because the whole thing is designed for the test, right? So now, when you do this development in this fashion, the work which is done in terms of fixing the bugs or the rework, that gets reduced, right? So here we are minimizing the work that is done, or in other words, maximizing the amount of work not done, right? So this is just an example, and it, though it is kind of counterintuitive, I think this is a great principle, right? Again, the focus is on self-organizing teams, that we talked about the trust built with the teams. This is again, I would say, critical. Finally, the reflection, what happens, right? Once whatever we are doing, even in traditional projects, there is a lessons learned which is done. Typically, that is done at the end of the project. But when you are doing this continuously, periodically, saying, what have I done and what needs to be done? How can I improve what I have done? If this reflection is going to be a continuous process, that makes a huge difference, because you're continuously adapting and continuously changing and continuously bettering yourself. Right? So this is a kind of overview of the principles on which agility is built, and I would say this should form the foundation of agility.
Right, sir. Sir, I totally agree that IT is one of the most crucial supporting factor of every business. Even the latest statistics reports are saying that. So no matter if you are from pharmacy or healthcare, civil, real estate, you name the business, IT is going to support that. This is the reality of today's situation, and that is why we need to be agile. So, having said that and establishing that, my next question would be, sir, what's the difference between the traditional project management and then agile project management?
Sure. So we touched upon some traditional project management aspects, right? So when we talked about the principles, if you look at the definition of a project, it is something which has a start and something which has a stop, right? So a project starts and a project stops. And that is why, in fact, if you look at it today, there is a lot of focus which is shifting, which is saying that there's a mindset shift which is required from looking at it from as traditional projects to a mindset of products, right? So because the business is not something which is going to stop. A project has a start and stop. So rather than doing that, how do we continuously support the business? I would say that is the fundamental difference between a traditional project, where when it starts, you plan specifically for the project. You plan what resources are needed, how people should be deployed, and how it should be budgeted. Everything is dependent on this traditional start and stop. And the other major thing which it would kind of, I would say, assume is that the requirements are known in the beginning, or requirements are gathered in the beginning, and the scope gets defined. And every project manager's nightmare is scope creep, right? And how to manage this? Sure. Do they have ways to address it? Absolutely. Traditional project management also has ways to address it. And but the thing is, when you have cumbersome change management, which needs to be used to address the change in scope, but just because how the projects are managed, because of those principles and the tools and techniques, you will need to use these, and that delays the execution, and that kind of becomes a hindrance. Whereas that is why in agility we say that we welcome the change, right? And we adapt to that, rather than saying we have a fixed plan. We want to adapt to the change, right? And this is where it also, if we are agile, it helps us in using an iterative process, which helps agility itself. And you will see that, right? How, in when you compare these two things, how the resources are deployed, how people are deployed, how the budgeting is done, these are entirely different when you look at traditional project management or when you look at an agile setup.
Right, sir. And sir, that brings to my next question also. Most of the time I hear students saying it's so expensive, ma'am. I mean, doing the traditional project management course and doing the agile course, it's like very expensive. So do you agree? Is agile expensive?
So I would say that, if you look at doing a course, yeah, it be it on project management, be it on agility, or be it anything else, yeah, a technical study, whatever it is. Take for example, you want to do an MBA. You can do an MBA starting right from 50,000 rupees, where universities offer MBA, right? You can start from 50,000 rupees, and it goes on to a few tens of lakhs, yeah, 25 lakhs, 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs, 50 lakhs, and so on, right? Both of them offer an MBA. So can we simply say that one is expensive and the other is inexpensive?
Right.
The value is different, but similarly, the value offered by that is different. So I would always say, look at the value which gets offered and make your decision based on that in terms of what you want to
Right.
adopt.
Right, sir. So, Arvind sir, one of the other questions that I receive from students more often is some of these students, they are from non-technical background, like from mechanical background, civil background, and they often ask me this question, ma'am, can Agile be relevant to a non-software development environment as well? Like where there is no, yeah. So, is it relevant?
Yeah. So this is what I would say, right? So if you look at it, when we say agility, what I would do is I would take you back to the first slide, right? How did we define agile? And this is what we need to constantly keep at the back of our mind, right? Every business, be it a software development, be it anything else, they operate in that context, and every business needs to adapt. And there are enough case studies which has been done. And one of the classic things which everybody knows and everybody talks about is Nokia, for example, right?
Right.
How they didn't adapt, or how they didn't, they just totally ignored when Android came in, and they did change. Okay? Are you able to hear me? There's suddenly a pop-up which
No,
came.
no, no, no. I'm able to hear you. Everything is fine,
Okay,
sir. Please continue.
clear, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there was a pop-up which came saying some new mic something. Okay, so right, so we everybody knows about that case, right? And it was totally, I would say, the crux of it, right? What, even though it ignored Android, it was not, the whole thing was not related to change, was not related to software development, or software development was not the thing which they failed to see, right? So irrespective of that, take Kodak for example, and they actually invented digital photography, right? But they lost sight of it somehow. Again, not related to software at all, right? But the lack of agility is what I would say has been their undoing. But then, of course, agility, irrespective of what business you are in, it is applicable everywhere, and you need to do it. And also, one of the other catchphrases which is you will hear a lot these days is design thinking, right? It is catching up, and everybody is talking about design thinking, and these principles which was brought in by design thinking, or I see several of these things kind of existed even before, but these frameworks kind of gave it a structure, right? And one of the things which, again, this book, which is the Lean Startup, but by Eric Ries, right? It introduced the concept of MVP, right? Which again is another buzzword in the Agile community and so on. These principles, the iterative approaches, the MVP approach, rapid prototyping, and so all these things, right? This is true of whether you're developing a software or whether you're developing some other product. And these approaches help the product succeed in the market and helps the business in delivering the value proposition if the business is agile.
Right. So, sir, going back to the discussion on the frameworks that you initially
Mm,
was saying that there are a lot of frameworks. If you're talking about one single team, then Scrum and others. If you're scaling up, then there is Scaled Agile, then there is Scrum, extension of the Scrum and those things. But let's come to this fact that latest statistics are also showing that most of the businesses are adopting Scrum.
mm,
So if you could throw some light over this framework where Scrum Master fits in, what is the difference between a Scrum Master and project manager? There's a lot of myths, lot of videos, lot of misconception going on these two roles. And people generally thinks that being project manager is the waterfall manager and Scrum Master is someone who is into Scrum framework. That's the only difference. But I'm sure with this webinar we can, debust that myth and say that, yes. So Scrum framework in a nutshell, and then Scrum Master role compared with project management. Would our students would love it. Yeah.
sure. So, so when we talked about these frameworks, like you said, and Scrum, again, you rightly said that one of the most adopted frameworks is the Scrum framework, very widely adopted. And there is a lot of organizations which use this Scrum framework. To give you a brief idea about what this is it has certain structures and process and techniques which aid agility. One of the things which we talked about when we were just in the last question is about iterative development. Right? This iterative development is one of the key principles against which Scrum is based on. Right? So what Scrum does is it says that this iterative development, it divides the time frames, and it each development time frame is called a sprint. A sprint typically is nothing but a box of time in which work gets done, right?
Correct.
And this sprint could be anywhere between 1 week to 4 weeks, typically that's what Scrum advises. Okay, so within this sprint, how the development work happens, what should be done, what are the kind of events which should take place. There is a guideline which Scrum has laid about, and which is commonly available in the Scrum guide. And this is what the framework is about. I will give you a very, you can see the screen displaying the Scrum framework, right? So I'll just quickly walk you through each of these elements, what it means, so that a very broad understanding can be had, right? So here at the left corner, what you can see is the product backlog. Okay, so a backlog is nothing but a list of elements which define what work needs to be done. So that is my backlog. So overall, you have something called a product backlog. Whatever product I'm working on, what all needs to be done for that. And then we said that there is an iterative development which happens within this defined time frame called a sprint, within which the work gets done. So let us, just for example, let us say that we will adopt a 2 week sprint, which means that each sprint is going to span across 2 weeks time. And what we would do is, from the product backlog, which has these items, different backlog items, which defines the work which needs to be done, for each sprint, from the top, we will pull off the amount of work or the number of backlog items which we are going to work for in that sprint. So sometime we need to look at, how we are going to do that, what needs to be done. First, the backlog gets prioritized, saying what is most important and what needs to be addressed first, and that's put on the top of the list, and so on. During an event called as sprint planning, what people would do is the team would get together and look at the product backlog and take the topmost from the product backlog, because that is the most important and that is how it was prioritized. And they would try to say, okay, can I fit this in the capacity which I have within this 2 weeks time frame can I develop it? Okay. And how much capacity to work should I allocate for it? That is decided, and that is pulled from the product backlog into the sprint backlog during the sprint planning. And then once I take out one item, I go to the next item, look at the same thing, look at my capacity, and put that into my sprint backlog if there is capacity. And until my capacity becomes full, I keep pulling from the product backlog and adding it to my sprint backlog. And once that is done, once the entire team which agrees on it, later in a bit I will also we'll also delve into your other question about Scrum Master and so on. But typically Scrum Master is a role within the team, and typically you will also have another role called a product owner in the team, and the Scrum Master, the product owner, and the rest of the team. Okay, for convenience sake, let's just call it the team or developers or whatever it is, and the rest of the team, and everybody will agree saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do in this sprint. And a sprint goal is evolved, saying this is the goal of this sprint. All this happens during the sprint planning, and at the end of it, the team is clear. In this sprint, in our case, it's 2 weeks. So in this sprint, what I'm going to accomplish, what I want to work on, and what I want to deliver. So that is what the sprint planning is about, so that there are no surprises, so that we are able, everybody is on the same page throughout the sprint. What Scrum also advocates is to have a daily stand-up, where there is a daily stand-up where everybody gets together on a daily basis. And for each of these events, which said sprint planning is one event, now daily stand-up is another event. Some people use the terminology of calling it as ceremonies, some people use event. It doesn't matter what terminology we use, as long as we understand what it is, right? So the daily stand-up, people get together, they talk about what was accomplished, what needs to be, what they plan to do the next day or this day, and whatever challenges, whatever impediments, whatever difficulties they may be facing, these gets discussed. It is time boxed. Typically, why it's called a stand-up is because we don't want to spend hours together discussing this. So typically 15 minutes is what is advised, and everything gets discussed, and the team comes on the same page. But then, can everything be discussed in 15 minutes? What if there is a challenge which is going to take a long time to discuss, right? So one of the key things that Scrum focuses on and advocates is the time box. It says all the events needs to be time boxed, and whenever such things arise where the discussion will have to be a longer one, then it's simply called out, saying, okay, let us have this discussion separately at a different time, not during the stand-up itself. But now at least we know that this is a topic we need to discuss, and this is a challenge that we are facing, and what is the impact of that, right? So a daily stand-up happens, or daily Scrum as it is labeled here. So this is a daily event. Then at the end of the sprint, we should ideally be having some working software. We are talking about the software context, or whatever work is getting done, some working product or some increment of that product. And that is this increment which needs to get delivered, right? So once that increment is available at the end of the sprint, there is a sprint review which happens. Some people can call it a sprint demo. A demo is part of the review. And during the sprint review, typically the increment is showcased to the different stakeholders. They also discuss the challenges, if there were whatever challenges they faced during that, and those points also get discussed with the stakeholders. And this increment is ready to get delivered. Once that happens, at the end of the sprint, again, in one of the principles we saw about reflecting and adapting, right? So what we have as a sprint retrospective, where in the sprint retrospective, the entire team again gets together and discusses saying, looking at how the sprint went and what went, the fundamentals of what went well, what could have been done better, and what changes need to be adopted. Any challenges gets highlighted and discussed, and that is what happens typically during a retrospective. It's each of this is a much larger subject in itself, but this is to give you an overall idea at the end of which the product gets delivered. And this iteration keeps happening again and again. So the sprint, at the end of the sprint, the next sprint will start. Then that ends and the next sprint will start, and so on. So this is the overview on how the Scrum framework works. In any specific question on this which you want to address?
No, sir. I totally agree that the evolution of the product is very much needed. And in the traditional project management, that was missing. And somewhere when we adopt any framework for that matter, it's just not the product that we are delivering. We are evolving the product iteratively. Right. So we understood it well. And one of the most common questions I get from the students is also on the fact that whether role of Scrum Master is suitable for me, role of product owner is suitable for me, where should I see myself? Now there is a fresher who is from a different background, let's say mechanical, but she was in software for some time, but then she wants to make a career switch. Let's say we are in that kind of situation. So where do we recommend Scrum to a student, or where do we recommend being a product owner as coaches when we are about to teach them? Because there are a lot of myths and a lot of people who are running this business and they want to sell the courses as well. So
Sure.
oftentimes these students get in hands of those and they feel that just being a Scrum Master would solve my problem. But it's not that simple. We know that it takes a lot of effort. So how do students choose?
So I will kind of club this question with the previous one. Actually, the previous one also you asked about what is the role of a Scrum Master. I will kind of combine these two to answer it. So if you look at what is the role of a Scrum Master, right? This is right. I've just taken an excerpt from the Scrum Guide. What the Scrum Guide talks about in terms of the role of a Scrum Master. First of all, it says that the Scrum Master is responsible for the organization's adopting Scrum in the way prescribed by Scrum. Right?
Right.
So that is the primary role of the Scrum Master. And here you will see how the Scrum Master can help the Scrum team. Again, as per the Scrum Guide, how the Scrum Master can help the product owner and how the Scrum Master can help the organization. Right? Typically, the Scrum Master wears three different hats. The Scrum Master, while educating their team and the other stakeholders in the organization, they have to do trainings, they run workshops. So they typically wear the hat of a trainer. Will they have to train on Scrum? Yes, they might have to deliver trainings on Scrum. So they wear the hat as a trainer. The Scrum Master also wears the hat as a facilitator for a wide variety of events which happens, like say the sprint planning. Again, the Scrum Master will facilitate it, right? And all the events typically are facilitated by the Scrum Master for the simple reason that, again, what we have to keep in mind is the Scrum Master role is a leadership role. The Scrum Master is a leader. So the Scrum Masters, it comes within the Scrum Master's purview to facilitate the events, to address and typically it is conflict is something which is unavoidable. You will see it in every event. There will be conflict, some sort of conflict, right? So it becomes the responsibility of the Scrum Master to facilitate the event and to resolve the conflicts as well, right? So it's some kind of I often use this term when it comes to Agile coaches, and typically they, a lot of times in my engagements and when I talk to people ask me, you used to work for some organization and you are independently consulting now, and what is the difference between the two, right? But to me, the first thing I would say, and not only because I'm an independent consultant, but also if I'm a Scrum Master somewhere or working somewhere, the first thing I would say is influential leadership, because everybody doesn't report to you. And as a Scrum Master, you not only have to facilitate these events with the teams, there will be stakeholders, there will be business stakeholders, the CXOs of the different business verticals, or or the businesses itself will be, you need to work with them, and you will need to influence them in not only adopting, but again in terms of conflict resolution and so on. So it is a leadership role, and you are wearing, as a Scrum Master, you are wearing the hat of a facilitator to do all these things, right? And again, the third hat you need to wear is that of a consultant, where, because as a facilitator, typically you don't provide solutions, but then is a Scrum Master expected to provide solutions? Yes, sometimes, yeah. So not as a facilitator, but then you go into the consultant mode, right? So for example, for if there is a transformation happening, how do I prepare, or how do I create a strategy for that? How do I create a roadmap for that? What should be done next? How do I come up with a plan, right? And at that time, you are providing solutions, and you wear a consultant hat as a Scrum Master, and you come up with those things. So as a Scrum Master, you play all these different kinds of roles. In terms of contrasting it with the role of a project manager, it is a role of a project manager. Again, we already saw that a project has a very specific meaning, right? It has a specific start, a specific end, and a specific scope which gets defined, right? So as a project manager, one of the most important thing is to manage the scope and manage the people as well. Here, I wouldn't call it as managing people, but you need to lead them and influence them. Indeed, yes.
Yes.
So it becomes, so that is, I would say, is the key difference between you're a project manager as well as, and there are separate project management principles which you use to address projects and to run projects, right? So that I would say is the key difference. If we talk about your next question, where someone is looking at saying, should I take the role of a product owner, or should I take up the role of a Scrum Master? What should I do, right? I would say that decision should be based on what you enjoy doing most, because the product owner, here when I say product owner, it is the same function as a product manager, and as versus just an operational product owner. There are several large organizations which use typically someone like a business analyst for a product owner role. Mainly what they are doing, they are taking the requirements from the product manager and just creating some artifacts in the system and talking to the technical team, right? I'm not talking about that as a product owner. I'm talking about a product manager and product owner, where they define what the product should look like. What problem is the product solving for the customer? Empathizing with the customer, understanding the real customer need and the real customer pain, and devising or designing the product based on that, right? So if you enjoy doing that, then you typically take the path as a product owner or a product manager. If you want to, as we talked about, wear these different hats as a trainer and a coach, as well as a consultant, and focus on building the product alone, right? You're not building it, but you're facilitating or helping the team build it, then Scrum Master is probably the path you want to choose. So you look at these two things and see what you're equipped to do most and what you enjoy doing most, and based on that, make the decision on which path you want to take. That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I hope our students also can derive some sense from this conversation. Is going really good. Sir, inspiring from all the students that I cater to during my training sessions, as I'm saying, that all these questions are based on the fact that what students are wanting to hear or what their typical questions are, because sometimes they are reluctant to ask these questions. So just representing them. So what my typically next question is Agile for everyone? Everyone meaning freshers, students, or professional experience in any field. Is Agile for anyone? Is this the need of the hour? that everyone should learn agility now?
Okay. Again, I will take you back to my first slide. I'm not going to change it on the screen, but I'm going to take you back to the, why not? I mean, I can actually use it on my screen as well, right? And I truly believe this. I truly believe that any business needs to be agile even to exist, right?
Right.
But a business is there, it wants to thrive, it wants to grow, and it wants to thrive, right? So having said that, I would say, yes, you need to be agile.
Right, right, right. And I think it's also the need of the hour that students, freshens, even the curriculum needs to be adapted to this. That agile is the next big thing, and it goes well with all the upcoming digital technologies that we are seeing, whether it is metaverse, AI, AR, VR. We are just moving at such a fast pace that agility is the only option students also have, freshers also have, professionals also have, even the businesses. And fortunately, with Labs, I was able to speak to some of the like-minded people as well, and the businesses in India, not abroad for that matter, in India, particularly strictly speaking from Maharashtra aspect, which are small scale industries or medium scale businesses. So they don't even have any apprehension about agility. They haven't heard about agile for that matter. So my next question to you, and the last question, because in the interest of the time, uh, businesses in India has, I would say, there's some sort of illiteracy when it comes to educating them on agile, or even to even begin training them into agile is a very tedious process these days. What's your outlook on it? Do you think in India the businesses which are running by so-called gujus, marwadis, or baniyas, or this and that, do you think that they will adapt to agile one day? Or how's the current state looking like compared to global? We know that already the global aspect is very different, but then what about the business?
Right. So I think I, I know we are running out of time, but if it's okay, I will tell you a small story.
Not sure, sir.
And yeah, and this is a story which I heard when I was a kid. Okay, and this is about Akbar and Birbal. And I'm sure in India everybody knows Akbar and Birbal, right?
Right,
So Akbar told Birbal to go and find him 10 fools.
right,
So this is the task which he mandated Birbal with. And Birbal is in the process of finding these fools. And one day, I'm going to talk about the eighth fool. Okay? So one day, Akbar comes riding in his horse. Akbar is not, he comes incognito. Okay. So he is coming as a common man, and he's riding his horse and he's coming down. And he finds Birbal is there with another guy, and both of them are sifting the sand beneath their feet and trying, looks like they're searching for something. So Akbar comes to Birbal and he asks him, what are you doing here? So Birbal says, see, this man here, he lost his ring, and he's trying to find it. I'm helping him. So Akbar also says, okay, let me also help. And Akbar also starts searching. And after some time, now nobody's finding something. So Akbar calls that man and asks him, where exactly do last time you saw, where did you see your ring? Which place exactly? So the man points to some 500 yards away, and he says, that is where my ring fell down.
right, right.
Curious now. Akbar says, no, then why are you searching here? If it fell there, you should search there. The man says, but there is no light there. It is so dark there. Here only there is a street light. So I'm searching here. I can't search there. Right?
Right, right.
And the story goes on to say that, Birbal says that this is your eighth fool, and you are the ninth fool to have given me this task, and I am the 10th fool to have accepted this task. Okay, that's how the story
Very
goes.
nice. Very nice.
But the reason I said this, right, is any concept or any philosophy or any framework is useful only as long it is applied in the context of your business.
Correct.
So if you are not able to take it and apply it in the context of your business and look at what makes sense in the context of your business and do it, then we are like that fools looking and searching for it elsewhere, right? So to answer your question, is agility relevant? Yes. However small the business is, be it small, be it however small scale it is, they have to be agile. And you will see that, in fact, all these small home run businesses, and you will see that intrinsically they are agile. They are constantly looking at their environment, and they adapt to it, right? You
Right.
go to these small people, if they in fact starting right from the pricing. You go and ask them, they might tell you one price, and for somebody else the price might be different, right? They
Right.
quickly, they're so agile, they do everything here. They quickly adapt to what is needed, and they go out and deliver. It's possible in a small scale business to do it without having any proper training on the principles or anything. But I would say that when it expands into a little larger scale, right? So what they already probably follow in being agile, okay, probably it will enhance their business to go to the next level, to
Right.
grow to the next level, where then you will see, then these principles, these frameworks will help them to adapt their business as it goes. Second you on that.
A lot of tenders are coming up as well on the same lines. And if you look at the GEM website and all they are looking to develop softwares which is driven in an agile process.
Mhm.
So we are just the driving force, but we need help of these students and freshers to upskill themselves so that they can join us and help us to boost our economy from the this country aspects and worldwide contributes. So having said that, sir, it was indeed a pleasure talking to you. I want to conclude this meeting with a very heavy heart. I want this conversation to go on because I know our students will learn so much more. But I would insist all the students to stay tuned to our channels because we are going to have so many webinars and learning sessions with sir and other agile coaches, and we are going to collaborate and we're going to learn and have an amazing time in future. So stay tuned with the channels. That's all from my side. Thank you, sir. Thank you others for joining this call. Concluding the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you so much, Kunjita, and it was my pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.